Hi, I'm John Didakis, and you're one to one with me. And I'm one to one with a guy named Dennis DeRose. Dennis is an interesting guy. He and I have just had a few email exchanges, but he's an interesting person, and I think you'll like listening to what he has to say. He's a retired corrections counselor. He's been editing mostly fiction for the last 10 years or so, and he's edited mysteries, action and suspense, historical fiction, romances, general fiction, fantasy, just about everything. Children's books, dream journals, memoirs, travelogues, young adult, addiction manuals, Christian fiction, a lot of stuff. And that's what makes him an interesting person and why I'm interested in talking to him today. He runs Money Saver Editing, and his slogan is "We're not done until you're happy." So, Dennis, thank you very much for being here, and let's get to know each other because this is a treat for me because I'm getting to know you. So, tell me, tell me first how you made the transition from being a counselor in a prison to being a manuscript editor.
Okay, John. Well, first of all, thanks for letting me be here today. Um, I knew I was going to retire in 5 or 6 years, and I wanted to do something useful. Um, and I've been reading all my life. I love to read, and I had been reviewing a few books on and off, and I thought maybe I could help some writers by reviewing on a regular basis. So I went online and I contacted a wonderful lady named Debbie Gaynor in Kentucky. She owns Reader's Favorite, which is a book review, large book review venue. And we started talking, and she asked me what I like to read, and that was the beginning of the whole thing.
Tell me then more about your career as a counselor in a corrections facility. I mean, do you have like a background in clinical psychology, or what prepares you for something like that?
No, I don't really have a background in clinical psych. I mean, I majored in psychology in college. I've always wanted to help people all my life, and I thought maybe that would be the best way to do it. And really, I never started out as a counselor. I started out working in a storeroom for New York State in a mental facility, but that isn't really what I wanted to do. And just little by little, I entered the prison system as working in a storehouse, and then I started to go up the ladder a little bit. I became a counselor, a trainee for quite a long time. Eventually, one of the superintendents, threw me a bone basically, and gave me a job as a counselor. And until before that, I had been actually training several counselors over the years to become better counselors. And
What does a prison counselor do?
I mean, well, other than talking to inmates, of course, we're responsible for a lot of paperwork. We run programs. I ran the aggression replacement therapy program for several years. I was a notary public for 20 years, I think. Um, so I've done an awful lot of things over time
What
because
were
I
some of the things? What were some of the things that the prisoners wanted to talk about when you were counseling? What were some of the main things that you were counseling them about?
I mean, they wanted. It wasn't a lot of times they just wanted somebody to talk to, somebody that they knew would treat them like I would want to be treated. You give what you get in prison. You give what you get in life, and and mostly we just talked, and they appreciated that. I'd help them keep in touch with their families, and just a whole gamut of different things.
Hmm. Was it a satisfying career?
Very satisfying.
Because why?
Because I knew I was helping, and they actually it wasn't whether I knew it or not. They told me, and that meant more to me than whether I knew I was helping or not. Just the getting the feedback, and it was genuine. So
Okay.
Oh,
Um, and where was this? Where were you primarily?
I I worked at Mid Orange Correctional Facility in Warwick, New York, for a few years, but mostly I worked at Otisville Correctional Facility in Otisville, New York, which is right next to Middletown, New York, and I worked there for over 20 years.
And the people you met with, what kinds of things were they in prison for?
The whole gamut: uh, drug sales, uh, some were perhaps for kidnapping or murder or rape, all kinds of things.
Would you say that there is, based on your experience talking with people in the general public, do you have a sense that people have a misperception of what a hardened criminal in a prison is? Is there, would people be surprised at the kind of people you talked with?
I think they'd be very surprised. People look at the TV and that's what they go by. These guys aren't like that. Most of the guys, they just wanted to get out, and become productive. But there were always a few knuckleheads that you knew were just trying to play you. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Did you get a sense that I mean, the whole idea of prison, from what I've never been in prison, but from what I understand, it's supposedly designed to rehabilitate, to make a person, especially if they're only in for, a limited amount of time, to come back out into society. Does the prison system actually, in your opinion, based on your experience, do a good enough job in helping prepare people for life on the outside? Because there will come a time when many of these guys are released.
For the most part, prison is punitive, but um, over time, it's become better, uh, prepared to help guys on the outside. It was a big change since the '70s, and then 30 years later, there were so many more programs to help guys on the outside. I was privileged to help with that as well.
So you, in a sense, over the career that you had of more than 30 years, you saw a change for the better in terms of rehabilitation?
Correct, very, very much so. When I started in '77, the recidivism rate was 90%. When I retired in 2013, the recidivism rate had dropped to 45%.
And recidivism is basically someone who does a crime, does the time, gets out, and then goes back.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. And what's the reason for the reduced recidivism rate?
I mean, I like to think that counselors made a big difference,
Yeah,
but
yeah, go with that.
I have no way to know that. But the governor of New York State at one point instituted a three strikes and you're out law. That meant that if you committed a third felony, that you'd be in jail, in prison for life. No inmate wanted to do that, so that had a big made a big impact.
Uh-huh. So then they really had to get serious about turning their life around.
Correct, absolutely.
Did you keep in touch with anybody after they got out of prison?
Technically, we're not supposed to, but yes, yes, I
Really?
have, and I still do.
And how would you describe the quality or the dynamics of those
Those
relationships?
guys, those guys are doing great right now.
Okay. Do any of them write?
Yes, yes, there are guys that write. Actually, I'm helping a guy right now named Philip Hall, and he has created an app for oh, what do you call it when somebody's under a lot of stress and now I can't think of it right now, right off the top of my head. But I'm actually helping him with that app right now.
Hmm. Tell me then the transition that you made from being a prison counselor to being an editor. That must be a much different and maybe even lonelier pursuit or experience.
Well, I don't think you can really relate one. There is a relationship actually. The relationship is that as a counselor, you have to pay very close attention to detail, and as an editor, you have to be very detail oriented as well. And I've always loved books, so it was just just a process.
Okay. So, if you're just joining us, I'm talking with Dennis DeRose. Dennis is a manuscript editor, but before that, he had a career of about 30 years in the correctional system as a counselor. And the way we became acquainted was through Author's Den, which is an online um, website that primarily gives authors a chance to promote themselves, put their writing out there, their marketing, and an opportunity to review books, have your books reviewed. Dennis has reviewed a couple of mine, and he's a very generous editor. Although the impression I get, Dennis, is that if you don't like something, you don't pull any punches. Am I right about that?
Absolutely not, because if I did, I couldn't really help you, and
Well,
I can't do that.
and the other thing I noticed is that you also gave me some feedback on you caught some stuff. I mean, look, I'm an editor. My agent is an editor. My publisher is an editor, and there are still a few things that got through. I mean, we're talking granular, nitpicky stuff that you still caught. So, I can attest to your attention to detail, and I appreciate that. Not that the books are going to go through more than one edition, but you never know. So if they are going to need to be revised, you've given me some stuff to look at. But talk more about what it's like for you. I mean, I'm a manuscript editor, so I'm talking to my competition here. But talk about your job as a manuscript editor. How do you go about approaching it? How do your business model? Tell us how it works for you.
Well, I just need to say one thing, and you didn't know this, but I have two eyes, but I only have one that works.
Oh
The other
my.
eye doesn't work. So I've read one word. I've read word for word all my life. So the reason I catch those little nitpick things is because I read one word at a time. So it's tough to miss something when you only read one word at a time.
Wow.
I just wanted to let you know that.
May I ask how it is that you've only got one eye? What happened?
I went blind in my left eye shortly after I retired, but I've I've always had a serious eye problem. I've had several eye operations and things, but luckily I can drive a car somewhat, so I'm good.
Okay. So when we say eagle-eyed, we mean that literally.
Yep, yep. For
So
me,
talk ab-
for me, the one-eyed man is king.
okay. So talk about the approach that you take to editing manuscripts and how you've set up your business model and so on.
Well, I mean, once I meet someone and we talk a little bit, uh, usually online, then I ask the person if we can please phone each other. Because I'll be honest with you, if I can't talk to you person to person on the telephone, I'm not going to take a job. I won't even do it because then I don't have any sense of who you really are. And I think by talking to you, just like I'm talking to you now, I get a sense of the type of person you are. And I think when you enter into a job agreement with someone, you need to know, you need to fit. You need to be a good fit. And to me, that's very important.
Okay. Um, how can people get in touch with you if they'd like you to edit their manuscript?
Well, they can go through link. They can go through Authors Den if they'd like. They can go through LinkedIn. We're both on LinkedIn. They can go through Facebook if they want to. I don't give out my phone number, but I don't mind doing that.
And they can find you. I mean, your name is at the bottom of
Oh,
the screen there, Dennis DeRose. So that's the best way to. They should just Google that name, right?
if they do a search for money saver editing, I'll come up all over the place.
Okay, good. So,
So
what is your? I don't know. What are the biggest mistakes that you see in the manuscripts that you edit? What is there a recurring theme of
yes,
problems?
yes, there is yourself as well, but I won't hold that against you. I see. People tend to use like filler words. You know what a filler word is, and
Mhm.
people use words like this and that and but and for and uh, may and can and when actually you probably don't have to. And a lot of times when you write, you say things like he said, she said, Mary said, John said, and most of the time the dialogue is one to one, like we're doing right now. So I don't have to say John said, you don't have to say Dennis said, because we already know. You can follow that in the manuscript. Readers are bright enough to know that it's just not necessary, but oftentimes writers do that frequently.
Is
And
that go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, actually, if you think about it, if you take words out, you're trying to speed the read up, and that's what really readers want anyway, right? If I'm wrong, you correct me. But I think they want to read something and move right along. They don't want to dawdle. And so I think if you take words out that you don't need, I think it makes a big difference.
Right. What is that the biggest rookie mistake that you come across? Is
Um,
the he said, she said?
I mean, a lot of times, unfortunately, the whole manuscript doesn't make any sense. So you have to be man enough or care enough to let the writer know that they have to go back to the drawing board. I've had to do that many times.
And are most of the writers that you deal with, are they, first time writers trying to break in?
Not all of them are first time writers. No,
Hmm.
I've edited books. I just finished editing a book for a gentleman named Koos for Kijk from the Netherlands. He had written 60 books and he chose me to edit his next book. So I was pretty hyped about that. And so, yeah, so it's not always first timers, but there are. I'll work with first timers. I don't have a problem with that.
Hmm. And are you able to help people get a traditional book deal or
No, I'm
uh,
not. I'm not. I don't know enough about publishing to hook somebody up like that. But I have learned a lot in the last 10 years, and I do try to use what I've learned to make things better for the writer. And I do try to help writers with, finding a cover designer or something like that. I do know a few good publishers out there, but you know as well as I do that there's some unscrupulous publishers out there that are just out there to steal somebody's money.
mhm. So you're a big fan of the self-publishing.
Yes.
What are some of the do's and don'ts and things to be aware of when it comes to self-publishing?
Well, the biggest problem I find is that writers are in a hurry, and the way I see it, in this case, the slow turtle wins the race. I think if you take your time, you're better off. If you're in a rush, a lot of things can happen. If you're in a hurry with your manuscript and you give me your manuscript and it takes me longer to edit it, then you're going to pay more money. If you take your time and go over your manuscript over and over and over, and you send me a manuscript that's a lot more polished, you're going to save a lot of money.
What's a good length for a manuscript?
My opinion, it depends on whether you're writing a novella or a novel. I mean, a novella is probably something I would say under 30,000 words. I could be wrong. Um, I think a standard novel is anywhere between 50,000 and 80,000 words.
Mhm.
Of course, there are some fantasy. A lot of fantasy is a lot longer. Some romance fiction is a lot longer. But I don't think it's actually a good idea. This is just my personal opinion to let your manuscript extend over 120,000 words. That's just my own,
Right,
you know, who am I? I could be wrong.
right. But you prefer to work with what you call indie authors. What do you mean
Yes,
by that and why?
indie authors are just people like, you and me that just want to write. Um, I think indie authors put their heart in their writing. To them, writing is more important than the money. But there's a lot of authors out there, mainstream authors. You know who they are. I don't have to tell you that are just in it for the money. I mean, anybody that puts out a book every 2 weeks or every month, in my opinion, they're just in for the money. But I
Mhm.
mean, I might be wrong. I could be, I could be wrong. But that's the feeling I get.
Do you do anything in terms of helping a writer market their work once they decide to self-publish?
For quite a while, I had I was actually putting out a newsletter called Money Savers Marketing Minutia, but actually I didn't get enough feedback. So I kind of felt like I was wasting my time, so I stopped doing that. And I was just basically searching the internet looking for some solid marketing articles that I knew writers might be interested in. I had about 600 or maybe 700 writers that I was sending this thing to, but I wasn't getting a lot of feedback. I kind of felt I was being, I don't know, taken advantage of, or just like I was wasting my time. And I did that for, I think, a year and a half, but then I stopped doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not because I didn't
So,
want to help, not because I didn't want to help writers. I do want to help writers.
yeah. So where do things go from here? Do you see yourself doing any writing on your own, or is editing the love of your life besides your wife, of course?
Right. I do love to edit, but actually, I have written 5 short stories, and I do love to write. It's a lot of fun. But these are short stories. These are stories that basically less than 2,000 words. So, I mean, a short story, you know.
Well,
How,
is it I found it hard to write short stories. In fact, when I first started writing, I decided, well, I'll do a short story first, and when I get that published, then I'll give myself permission to write a novel. But short stories are hard, I think. So what's been your experience that way?
well, I mean, I've sent my stories to other writers and things, and I've gotten positive feedback. So I guess it's pretty good. Well, when we're done with this interview, I'll send you one of mine, and you can let me know what you think about it.
Okay, so revenge then.
Not really, but I value your criticism.
Thank you. Well, I think you're an interesting person, and even if you're a competitor of mine in terms of editing, that's okay because I know you're a good editor with uh, with a real uh, precise eagle eye, and I'm glad we've had a chance to meet. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
I mean, you don't have to worry about the competition. Uh, you know how many books are written in a year? There's, I think, 500,000. I think in a
Yeah,
year.
I mean, I think it's like 80,000 a day or something like that. It's just nuts.
I mean, in the USA, that I don't know whether it's in the United States or the whole world, but there's so many. You know, publishing is like it's like a pyramid. You know, and only you can make your books float to the top. You know, um, a lot of writers have a problem with marketing, and they don't want to market. They love to
Right,
write. Well, I don't know
right.
how you can really write and not market, because if you
Well,
don't
it's
market, your book isn't going anywhere.
well, that's true, and you would know this as a psychologist, or at least somebody who's worked in the psychiatric field. Marketing is there's a lot of psychology in marketing, and one of the things I've discovered is that writers tend to be introverts or shy, and
Right,
so marketing is almost antithetical to the kind of person they are. So the concept of that it's such a rude awakening for a writer to all of a sudden get a book deal and then find out, oh my God, I'm the one who's supposed to market it.
you mentioned
Gone are the days that, they're going to fund your cross country book tour unless
absolutely
you're John Grisham and you don't need it.
right. You mentioned shy. Writers are shy, and you're right. Here's why you're right, because I've seen so many times that writers will write a book, it'll be edited, they're very happy with it, and they just sit on it when they're done.
Yeah,
And then they'll go over the book and over the book and over the book.
that's right.
And then I say, "What'd you do with the book?" "Oh, I'm
Yeah,
still going over it." Well, wait a
right.
minute. You liked what we did, and we're happy. Everybody was happy. There's no point in going over the book. What's our next step? Then their answer is, "I don't know."
Right. And I mean, part of it is they want it to be perfect. And it's never going to be perfect. What it needs to be is done.
Yeah.
And that means it's as good as you can make it. And then you just have to let it go and start your next book, right?
Do you know what the average error rate is for editors? It's on the internet. Do you know what it is?
No. Well, tell me what you mean by error rate. In other words,
Any error in the manuscript. Could be a period, it could be a word, it could be a misspelling.
what's probably astronomical.
It's the error rate is about 5%.
And so what does that mean?
Well, honestly, I'm not 100% sure, but I've had writers tell me that my error rate is way less than 1%.
So what you're saying is that once a book has been edited, supposedly it's pristine. You know, the story may suck and all this kind of stuff, but you know, as far as typos and
I,
stuff like that,
I
it's
hope,
supposed to be pristine. But what I think you're saying is, even then, there's still going to be up to 5% mistakes in it. Is that what you're saying?
well, you said the story should be pristine when you're done.
Yeah,
I'm
but
not.
stories are subjective. Not every, you know, you could have a great story, but not every, it's not maybe going to resonate with everyone.
Oh, I
So I'm
know,
not talking about story. I'm
but I'm not
talking
just
about copy editing.
right. But I'm not just talking about proofreading a document. You know what I mean? There's a lot more to copy editing than just proofreading a document.
Right. Does the story work? Is it
And
well organized?
right, right. Does
That
it move
kind of stuff.
along? Does it move along? Is is it
But
first
how
person,
did, but,
second person?
but part of that is still subjective. You can't, I don't know if you can consider those errors because that's not an objective. I mean, you can only spell THERE one way unless you're using it in a different way. So spelling is spelling. You know, that's pretty objective and hard and fast.
Well, there's so many different errors that can be made. You could probably fill up a book with the errors that could be made in
Right,
writing a book.
right.
You know,
But if I understand you correctly, the mistake rate is based on copy editing, or does it factor in those other intangibles?
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I never could find out what they really meant by that. I've tried to find out what they're talking about, but people are they're so ambiguous.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess the point though that you're making is that, you know, even if it's edited, that doesn't make it pristine.
No, it couldn't be because it depends on. It's always based on opinion.
Right,
You know,
right.
one person might love the story and another person might hate it.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
look for yourself. Look at your reviews. You're going to have somebody will give you a 5-star review and somebody will give you a 1-star review because they didn't like what you were talking about. And
exactly.
that has nothing to do with the story. That's just how
Right,
you think. So you get a 1-star review when in fact it should have been probably much better than that.
right. Yes. Well, I'm glad we had a chance to meet. I wish you well in terms of your editing. I hope you get a lot more business because of this interview. And I feel that I've found a person who at least has liked one of the books that I've written, maybe two, and we'll see if it, you know, if they hold up over time.
I if I didn't like your books, I wouldn't have asked you to send me the other three.
Thank you very much. Um, I'm glad we met, Dennis. This is Dennis DeRose. He's a former prison counselor who now edits manuscripts. And you've been one to one with him and one to one with me. I'm John Dedekis, and I'll see you next time.
A pleasure. Thank you.